Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. It's time for another mini Fragrance World haul. Yesterday these four bad boys got delivered to me. Four fragrances from the brand of Fragrance World. And they are the following. Starman, which is supposedly very heavily inspired by Thierry Mugler's Amen, the OG Amen. Carlisle, which as you can probably guess is supposedly inspired by Parfums de Marly's Carlisle, and two from the John Gustav home line, Amaze, which is inspired by Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Beau, and Le Parfum, which is inspired by Jean-Paul Gaultier Le Mot Le Parfum. So let's unpack them and let's try them for the first time. I'll start by checking off Starman from Fragrance World. This will be the first fragrance that I'm going to check out. As I said, this is supposedly inspired by the OG Amen from Thierry Mugler. The packaging and as far as I know the bottle design are very similar to Starman Nebula, which is a clone of Pure Malt, again from Fragrance World. And yes, bottle design is pretty similar. One interesting thing is that the production date of this bottle is October of 2021, so it's quite an old bottle. Let's check out how this one smells. I have a little bit of a juice left from the OG fragrance stashed somewhere that I'm really cherishing and keeping for the rest of my life. Sprayer is not the best in the world. And now onto the scent of Starman from Fragrance World. Yes, it carries a very strong resemblance to the original Amen from Thierry Mugler. Opens up quite fresh, quite aromatic. I pick up a mint note in here, a lavender note. There's a hint of an alcohol sharpness in the opening of this fragrance. I remember that the Starman Nebula also used to be like that when I initially got it first. It's spicy. It feels boozy as well. There's some sweetness somewhere in the background. And in fact, the more this starts to dry down, the slightly sweeter it becomes. But definitely sort of a very boozy fragrance. And it's pretty much it's reminding me a lot of the OG. The next two that I'm going to try will be from the John Gustav Home line, and I'm going to start with Amaze. Now I'm not too sure what to expect if this is inspired by the OG Le Beau or Le Beau Le Parfum, so let's try it and see how this one smells. This is how the box looks, has this sort of an fresh looking colors, green and yellow slash golden. And then this is how the actual bottle looks, and it's very similar to the original fragrance. Let's take a paper strip, check out this sprayer. Better sprayer than the first one, definitely. Now onto the scent of John Gustav Home Amaze. Okay, that actually smells really nice. I think this is cloning or has been inspired by the OG Le Beau. It opens up quite fresh and fruity. There's a very strong pineapple note in here. Some ginger freshness, a bit of a green touch to it as well. Strong coconut note. It's sweet but not overly sweet, something that I actually like, because when a coconut note is used and it's overly sweet, I'm not a huge fan of that. Just a simple reminder of why I didn't like Assad Zanzibar that much, because it was so thick and sweet in the opening that I just couldn't stand it. But this feels fresher. This feels more like a fruitier, fresher take on a similar DNA. It's quite sweet, maybe a hint of woodiness, but definitely the opening is very sort of fruity and slightly fresh, maybe with a hint of a green touch somewhere in the background. The next one in line will be John Gustav Le Parfum, this one being inspired by Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Mot Le Parfum, one of my most favorite designer fragrances. So let's see how close this one gets to the original fragrance. Similar size bottle to box to the previous one, but here the accents are golden and black. And probably the bottle design will be again very similar, but in black color. Let's see. And yes, this is how the bottle looks. Black colored bottle with golden accents and golden colored cap. I think it's has metallic coating, feels quite heavy in hand. Let's check out the sprayer here. Again, a decent sprayer, although the Amaze one seems to be a little bit better. Now onto the scent of Gustav Homme Le Parfum. Okay. Definite inspiration of Le Mot Le Parfum from Jean Paul Gaultier. But this for some reason feels quite a bit lighter and slightly more powdery, at least in the opening. You get that signature DNA of the Le Mot line with a hint of mint, with that vanillic sweetness, and with an added sort of an iris powderness, like with the original fragrance. But this feels like a lighter and more powdery take on the original DNA. At least in the opening, lacks a bit of that sort of the sweetness and warmth that I get out of the original fragrance. Definitely recognizable that this is what has this been inspired by. But for some reason, maybe I'm going nose blind to it, but it feels very light, at least like my first initial impressions of this one. And let's check out the last fragrance from this mini haul, that's called Carlisle, and has pretty much the same logo as the original fragrance, something that I don't really like, you know, copying the name and the whole presentation one-to-one is just, I've never been okay with this. An interesting fact is that the fragrance comes ripped around with this sort of a ribbon thing, a sort of like you get a present of sorts. Let's open it up. Just wanted to mention something else interesting. The production date on this particular bottle is September of 2022, so it's quite an old bottle, probably the oldest Fragrance World bottle that I have in my collection, and I'm curious to see how this one smells after sitting idle for 4 years. This is how the bottle looks. At least the bottle is not a one-to-one copy to the original fragrance. The cap has sort of a metallic coating on it. Let's check out the sprayer. Decent sprayer. Now the original fragrance I absolutely love, one of my most favorite Parfum de Marly's scents. I really love how sweet, boozy and dark it is, and interesting to see how Carlisle from Fragrance World will smell. Okay. Definite inspiration, it drew its inspirations definitely from Carlisle, the OG Carlisle. It's kind of fruity in the opening, a hint of spiciness, feels very boozy. There's some rose in here. Again, there's some sweetness, some vanillic sweetness, but this again feels like a lighter take on the original DNA, lacks a bit of that darker sweetness that I get out of the original fragrance. This feels a little bit more boozy in the opening. Maybe it's down to the perfumer's alcohol, which is something that they sometimes, Middle Eastern fragrance houses, they don't use too expensive ingredients, but I think this is more like an actual boozy note in here. This definitely feels like a boozier take on the original DNA. There's the the green apple sweetness, the vanillic sweetness, there's some spiciness, there's the rose in here, but just lacks the overall darkness of the original fragrance and the sweetness. Okay, now let's go over the dry downs of the 4 fragrances really quickly, and I'm going to do them in the same order and start with Starman, which is, of course is inspired by the OG Amen from Mugler. And the dry down of this fragrance actually becomes quite close to the original fragrance, pretty close. On the dry down, this becomes a lot sweeter compared to the opening. There's a very prominent coffee note. There's quite a bit of vanillic sweetness in here. It still retains some of that green feel that I got from it and the freshness that I got from it in the opening. It's somewhat boozy as well. It's quite dark, and it's actually a very sort of an old school scent, if that's the only way that I can sum this one up. It's definitely not a fragrance that's safe for blind buying, because nowadays fragrances tend to be a lot different from what this one smells in the OG. But the dry down is actually pretty close to the original fragrance. Time to talk about the dry down of Jean Gustav Homme Amaze. This one being inspired by the Le Beau fragrance from Jean Paul Gaultier. And on the dry down, again, pretty similar to the original fragrance. The dry down, now you lose pretty much all of the freshness from the opening. The dry down is this sort of a mix between the creamy vanilla, the creamy coconut note, some woodsy note somewhere in the background, and a hint of sort of a tonka bean powderness. And it's actually a very enjoyable, very easy to wear fragrance, at least from my initial impressions, and I'm quite surprised for the quality of this one and how much I actually like it, considering that I'm not a huge fan of the original fragrances. It's not as sweet as the original fragrances, and maybe that's why I like this one so much, at least at the current time. When it comes to the dry down of Jean Gustav Homme Le Parfum, again, like the opening, this is quite similar to the original fragrance, but it doesn't feel super close, at least for the moment. On the dry down, it becomes a little bit sweeter, a little bit warmer, just like the original transforms itself on the dry down, but this still lacks some of that vanillic sweetness that I get out of the original fragrance, and also just lacks the warmth and the projection of the original scent. Now, of course, this is a brand new bottle. I've recently opened it up, so I'll give it some time to settle down. Scent-wise, again, pretty similar, but it lacks the warmth, it lacks the sweetness, and at least for the moment, my guess will be that it lacks the performance of the original as well. And a few quick words about the dry down of Carlisle, which is cloning Carlisle from Parfums de Marly. And the dry down here, like with all other fragrances, is actually closer to the original scent compared to the opening. The opening felt a little bit fresher, a little bit lighter, and a little bit stronger on the boozy note compared to the original fragrance. But now here on the dry down, Carlisle actually is pretty close to Carlisle. I'm sorry that I have to say that. It's boozy, it's sweet, it's dark, it's spicy, slightly fruity, woodsy, all around very similar to the original fragrance, and I hope that this one actually has good performance as well, because I love the original scent. I also like a lot Cassius from Maison Alhambra, and I hope that Carlisle from Fragrance World will actually have good performance, because scent wise it's actually a very decent alternative for inspiration of PDM's Carlisle. And so guys, in today's video I unpacked and tried for the first time 4 scents from Fragrance World, and if I have to show you 2 that stand out, at least for the moment after my first impressions, those will be, surprisingly enough, the first one, Jean Gustav Homme Amaze, which I actually so far am enjoying quite a lot, and Carlisle. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.